Welcome to our podcast, Raising Big. This podcast is an ongoing conversation between myself and my young adult son. We're ready and willing to talk about all of the things families might experience in their lives and relationships, both as parents and young adults, from teens to 20 somethings, the good, the bad, and sometimes the ugly. In this episode, we're talking about an emotionally packed transition time for families, senior year. We have navigated the complex feelings coming from both sides of the parent child relationship during 3 senior years in our family. Each experience was unique, but the path to graduation day and launching into their next chapters seems to carry some common themes from child to child and family to family. So let's dive into this discussion. I'm Marcy and I'm the mom.
I'm Cade and I'm her kid. Senior year is a very exciting time and sometimes even a little bit scary for young adults. So, you're kind of venturing into that next step of your life, leaving high school behind, possibly leaving home for the first time. And that can just bring a lot of emotions. The year is packed with a lot of laughs. It's your last first day of school, your last time seeing your friends, your last year of high school. A lot of things are coming to an end. And that can carry some sadness for some parents and some kids as well. But it also is a lot of firsts that can be very exciting and can sometimes even cause question as to whether you or your child is ready and if you prepared them well to take that next step of life. So, Mom, can you tell me how you equate senior year to being an experience? What is that like? I know you kind of have mentioned that it's kind of like the slow peeling off of a band-aid. At least you said that when I was graduating. So what do you mean by that when you say that slow peeling off of the band-aid?
Yeah, I have said that ever since your older brother, went through his senior year. It was my first time, right? I think sometimes kids forget that this is parents' first time living life too, right? So we're experiencing senior year. We've had our own many, many moons ago, and now we're experiencing it from the other side of the equation. And it feels like as every single laugh happens, you, as a parent, you are very aware. This is the last time we're going to experience this. This is the last time we're going to experience this. Oh my gosh, this is the last first game of the football season. Oh my gosh, this is the last Christmas choir concert. Whatever that might be, there's a lot of realizations that go on for the parent that it is the last time that some of these things might happen. For some parents, if their kiddos end up moving away or moving out, it might be the last time everybody's home for the holidays.
Mhm.
So there's just a lot of dynamics that happen. And so it's continually happening over the course of an entire year. And so it is that slow peeling of the band-aid. And when you go to peel off the band-aid, right, like you think it's going to hurt less by
Mhm.
doing the slow peeling off. But in reality, all it does is prolong the pain, right? But there's no other way to do senior year. It's like a forced peeling off. And from my experience, it is no easier with number three than it was with number one. I don't know if you have a ton of kids, if it ever does get easier, but it was not easier for me. The only way it was maybe a little bit easier was that I knew kind of what to expect and I gave myself a lot more grace in what I was feeling. But that didn't mean the feelings didn't hit just as hard or, even sometimes a little more fierce with the third one. We dealt with a unique circumstance with you because you were part of that class of kids of 2020 who didn't get the last third of your senior year on traditional terms, right? Like you finished it off at home on the computer, stuck with your mom, woo, we didn't have a graduation party, all of that stuff. So that's kind of what I mean by that. It's a slow peeling off of the band-aid. Obviously, with graduation and launching your child being the end game of getting through that year. But let's start at the beginning. I know I have several close friends that have seniors this year. For most of them, it is their very first time through this experience. And so they're finding themselves maybe a little bit surprised by the fact that it's not just another school year. It feels completely different. So talk to me, Kate, a little bit about the beginning of the year and what you remember as a senior or what you remember hearing your brother and sister talk about or your friends talk about as far as how are you feeling when you go into the senior year? And then I'll kind of talk about kind of the contrast of what that's like for parents right at the beginning of the year.
For sure. I mean, to start off, I think it helps seeing my older brother and sister go through their senior year and kind of, have that experience and kind of, like you said earlier, you know what to expect. So by the time it came around for you as a parent, you knew what to expect. And by the time it came around for me, I didn't necessarily know what to expect, but I had, seen them, had conversations about it, and was able to kind of see how that played out for them. But I just remember it being a very exciting time. It's just, to me, senior year was all about just having fun and soaking in that last, bit of high school. because once you graduate, then you go off to college or you go off to working or your full-time job or whatever your plans are after high school. I think that high school is kind of, for the most part, there's some scenarios where kids are able to go to college and they don't have to work and they don't have to, do whatever and they can just have fun. But for the most part, I feel like high school is kind of those last years of being able to just have fun and just be a kid and kind of not have to worry about, any of those real life concerns. So I just remember the beginning of the year being a very fun time, a very exciting time, looking forward to all the things that senior year has to offer. Of course, with my situation with COVID, I ended up not getting some of those things. And in a way, we'll kind of talk about that later, but I think that kind of, played out for the best. But just being excited about, this is the last year with friends. And at least in my school experience, your senior year, that's when you are taking classes that are a little more geared towards whatever you want to do. So you're spending, more time. If you want to go into medical school, you're spending more time, in anatomy and science classes and doing the things you enjoy. Or if you want to, go be a chef, you're spending more time in the culinary arts classes or things like that. So I think senior year, just from what I remember, that start was just a very fun and exciting time, but also a little bit scary because kind of like I said, that excitement that it's the end of that last year of fun. That can also be scary, knowing that once this is over, you either are going to college or you're going into work or going trade school, whatever it is that your situation brings. Kind of, and maybe you don't even know what you want to do, and you then have to decide within the next year what that plan looks like for you. So it's a very exciting time, but can also be a very, nerve-wracking time. But as a parent, what did that look like for you, Mom?
Yeah, so I think, like you said, I love that you mentioned that you're excited because you're finally starting to put your hands on some things that you think you want to do and hopefully taking some classes that will lead you to where you want to go. I do know that some of my 3 kids and also other kids like change their mind their senior year about what it is they want to do. We did a whole episode on pivot, but it's very common. At one point, Sawyer wanted to be a vet. He now works for a university, and you at one time wanted to be a dentist, and now you're working for a financial institution. I think people's plans change, their interests. They might take a new class that would pique their interest. So I love that it still is a time of discovery. And I think in the fall, fun to watch your kid kind of blossom into who it is they think they would like to become in this next chapter of their life. For some parents, there is a challenge in trying to not control that journey because they have an image in their head of what their child might want to do or what they've been working towards, right? And so I think it's really important at this stage when you're in your senior year. Your child next year at this time is not going to have you hovering over their shoulder, making sure they've crossed all their T's and dotted all their I's. And that's hard at the beginning of the year because you're filling out college applications. You are going on some last minute college visits. You've probably spent your summer doing some of that if your child's interested in college. If they're joining the military, you've probably talked to a recruiter by this point in time, or that's on your to-do list. If they're going to a trade school, like that might be a thing. They might be thinking, okay, I don't want to go on to school. What kind of a full-time job am I going to get in order to be able to support myself? So as a parent, it's hard to not try to step in and control that journey, or to even just release the hold a little bit, right? So you want your child, if they're going to make mistakes, you want them to make them while they're still under your roof, so that you are able to help them when they truly need help. But you also need to start letting them practice flapping their wings during the beginning of that senior year, because they are full of excitement. They are full of energy. They are really passionate. And as we'll talk about, as the year goes on, that experience can change quite a bit for both kids and parents. Let's say you have a child playing football and you've been a football parent, right, for all these years, and you've hung out with these same parents for all these years. And if this is your first child, you probably haven't come to the realization yet that some of those people won't be in your circle next year, right? Your life changes too. Just because your child graduates doesn't mean their life is the only one that changes. And so your time you're spending going to their games all of a sudden frees up. The people you're hanging out with may not be all of those same people. So I think for parents, there is that kind of treasuring those last, there's a reason why there's senior night, whether it's at, Inquire, if your child's Inquire, or whether it's, on the football field. There's a reason why they do those kind of celebratory pieces, because the parents need some closure too. as some of these things go along. So I think at the beginning of the year, it's watching how excited your child is and kind of reveling in that. Like it's really fun to see your kid excited about the future, but then also like you've been through it yourself. And so you
Mhm.
kind of know where this is headed. So it's like, how do you be joyful for them without also being a little worried,
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
About how this is going to unfold.
Is natural, whether your kid
Hmm.
has a super solid plan or they don't know what they want to do or whatever the situation is. I think there's just that worry because, like you said, a lot of times the plan at the beginning of senior year is not, what ends up happening that time next year. So I think that that
Hmm.
worry is natural.
Well, and worry is really, in my life coach training, I learned that worry is really a dream stealing emotion. There's nothing positive that comes out of worry, right? It's wasted energy, it's wasted time because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what things are going to come across your child's path that might change their trajectory. You don't know where their head is going to be emotionally. You don't know where your own feelings are going to be emotionally 3, 6, 9 months, down the road. So if you're spending an inordinate amount of time worrying, it's actually going to be stealing some of the joy that you could be having in really being present in
Hmm.
the senior year for your child.
For sure.
So fall kind of happens, it unfolds, and then we start to get to the middle of the year, right? And there's that Christmas break that happens. That's what they call it in Kansas still, holiday break in other areas of the country, whatever they call it where you are. But you have that gap of probably about 2 weeks in the middle of the year. What happens, Cade, from a student perspective, when you're through the first semester, you've probably got some acceptance letters rolling in potentially. You get to that middle of the year. What attitude are you going into semester two with?
For sure. I think that mid year is kind of the switch of, focusing on kind of like you said, oh, I need to get into this college or I need to make sure to pass this class or things like that. At least for me and some of my friends, reflecting back on that experience, the middle of the year was kind of when it switched into that fun, time. And also in that second half of the year, that's when you have prom and graduation and, all these other senior events. Like we had a senior brunch in high school and things like that. And a lot of that happens. I think a lot of the bigger senior things happen in the spring. So I think that in that, holiday break is kind of that where that switch flips of, okay, like I've, worked hard the past 3.5 years and now it's time to, enjoy the things that I, have kind of earned to be a senior, things like that. And that also for me was when kind of that, you hear about senioritis and that sort of thing. That is when that really kicked in for me because, for the traditional student, you've been in school for the past, you know, 12, 13 years
Mm-hmm.
continuously, obviously with summers and stuff off. But, since kindergarten, you've been going to school every day, for 9 months out of the year and just doing that back and back. So I think that that kind of burnout settles in and just that senioritis of just saying, okay, kind of like you said, maybe you've got that acceptance letter or you have signed your contract to join the military once you're done with high school or, whatever your situation is for after high school. Usually those plans are kind of solidified at that point in time. So I think that that kind of takes the pressure off of, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm waiting to get into this school or I'm waiting to be accepted for this job or whatever the situation is. A lot of that kind of wears off and that's where that, fun kind of begins and you maybe kind of start to more focus on the fun rather than you focus on, the actual work. And I think that that isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think it happens with everyone. Obviously, your grades are still important and things like that. There's obviously still classes you have to pass in order to reach graduation. You're not
Mm-hmm.
guaranteed that diploma at that point. But I think that's when that, kind of senioritis settles in and you can have a little more fun with that rest of your senior year.
Yeah, for sure. And it is a lot of distraction, I think, for kids. And so for those kids who are struggling to make sure they've got the credits to get out of school and stuff, that can be a really challenging part of the relationship between the parent and the child. Because as a parent, you're sitting over here going, you know what, you still got stuff you got to do. You've still got to finish this out. You've got to see this through. And the kids are like, woohoo, I'm over here, I'm done with this high school thing, right? I'm ready to move on to the next chapter of my life. And so there's kind of that strange, that January, February, March of senior year. You're so excited about wrapping things up and about what the next chapter will be. And I remember for you guys and your friends, that was like all you guys were talking about all you were talking about is like all the stuff that was going to happen at the end of the year. And everybody was super excited. And the parent, meanwhile, not only are they saying, okay, but we got to finish this up, right? The parent, the shock is setting in, right? Because now their kids' focus is shifting. Things are winding up, right? You've now endured 4 months worth of this slow pull off of the band-aid. You're only halfway through, right? You know, you still got the other half to go. For me, there had been a lot of said by this point in time, not because I was worried about you guys, not because, you know, sad for your future, but I was like, this is a huge transition. And this chapter of my parenting life with this particular child is about to change dramatically. And it's kind of that pending sense of, and doom is not the right word, but kind of that impending sense of change coming. And so that becomes a distraction for the parent. And, you know, you want to be focusing on, oh, are we going to have a graduation party? Are we going to take a trip as a family? A lot of these plans are starting to happen in this mid-year phase. Taking a trip as a family was not a thing when we lived in Minnesota. Like that wasn't something that people did. I think every area of the country is different, but in Kansas, it's very typical for people to take a spring break trip or a trip the summer right after graduation, right? Like that's a very typical thing. And so we made that happen. And so that was exciting for me as a parent at the same time that it was like, oh my goodness, especially when your brother graduated, because my thought was his spring break might not line up with sisters next year. So like this might be the last time we all go on that spring break trip, right? So the reality of kind of the logistics starts to set in, and starting to think about, okay, well, if my child is going to be working a full-time job and wants to move out, like when do we need to start looking at apartments? Do they understand how much this stuff costs? Like moms start going through their cupboards, you know, what things can I pack away for my kids, you know, to use when they move out if I've got duplicates, or maybe I want to get some new things because I've been using the same things for the last 20 years and want some new things. So there's just all kinds of shifting and transitions and thoughts that are happening at that time of year, both good and also apprehensive, I think, at that point. And then the big sad sets in at the end of the year for parents. But before I get into that, let's talk about as a senior, like let's say you're looking at April, May, early down here towards the beginning of May. I know in a lot of other states, kids are going into June as they start later in school. But for you, Cade, what do you remember of that end of the year? Keeping in mind that yours was not normal, so you can reflect to your brother and sister and experience other people you know have had, but because you didn't get a graduation ceremony.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, my end of senior year was a little bit different. You know, I didn't get graduation or, you know, senior prom or, you know, senior parade, things like that, because it was around the February, March time and we got sent home and then, you know, continued to do school from home. So mine obviously looks a little different. You know, I didn't have a graduation party. I know most of my friends didn't. Some of them had small parties with like family and friends and close friends outdoors that were, you know, limited to a certain amount of people. But, you know, for the most part, for the typical senior year, that's just like such an exciting time of being able to have, you know, senior prom or, you know, kind of like you said earlier, I know different schools all around the country have different, you know, special things, whether it's a senior parade or a senior night or whatever it is. Some schools do senior pranks, different things like that. And I think that all of that is really fun time and kind of just almost kind of like your reward for everything that you've done, you know, over the past couple of years and all the hard work that you've put in. And I just think that that is such an exciting time to kind of, you know, revel in that and just experience all of that. And then you get to graduation, and that's kind of where I think the fun switches maybe to more of that sadness or kind of that shock of saying, okay, now we're done. I, you know, obviously can't relate, but I know, you know, just from watching my older siblings and friends that I know that have, you know, graduated and things like that, that graduation ceremony was a very emotional time because for a lot of the people that you're there with, you're never going to see them again. Obviously, you know, you have your close friends in high school that you'll probably continue to hang out with and, you know, throughout summer or, you know, keep up with on social media and over the years, whatever the case may be. Some people maybe are going to the same college, but a lot of those people, you know, the people that I almost kind of like to think of like extras as if it, you know, was a show, you know, the person who you've had English class with the past 3 years or your lab partner in chemistry class, things like that, that maybe you don't have that close friendship with, but you still, experience things together. All of that's coming to an end. You're realizing you're not going to see them again, or the teacher that you really bonded with, you're not going to see them again. And just kind of that everyday routine of waking up, going to school, having your set
Mm-hmm.
schedule with your set classes, coming home, doing your homework, all of that comes to an end. And then again, whatever your future looks like after high school, whether that's college or starting a job or going to
Mm-hmm.
a trade school, whatever it may be, that reality of that is setting in and the closeness of that is coming in. I know when I registered for classes for college that following fall after I graduated, I want to say I registered in like April or May.
Mm-hmm.
So you're kind of looking at your schedule and saying, okay, I've got, June, July, August, maybe September, depending on when your college starts. But I've got these, 3-ish months, and then I'm going to be in these classes back to back to back, or I'm going to be moving to this state or things like that. So I think kind of the realness of it all sets in. I think
Mm-hmm.
at the beginning of the year, you kind of get that excited feeling, things like that. You're putting in the work to kind of finish things off. The middle of the year, you're like, okay, I've done the work. Now it's time to have fun. You're having that fun through the end of the year. And then the end of the year, it's kind of like, oh crap, this is real now. I actually have
Mm-hmm.
to move away to the college that I, wanted to go to, or I have to move into my apartment that I decided I wanted to get, or I'm
Mm-hmm.
going off to basic training for the military, whatever your situation is. I think kind of that reality of it sets in, and you just kind of look back at the past years and realize all the fun you've had, all the work you've put in, and can look forward to what's exciting about it. But as a parent, what is that end of year like for you, Mom? Obviously it was a little different for me, but when you're looking
Right.
at planning graduation parties, or planning, kind of like you mentioned, senior trips, or planning
Mm-hmm.
to move your kid away to college in the next coming months, what does that look like as a parent?
It can be very overwhelming as a parent when all of that is coming at you at once. And I think to the level at which, some parents are very type A. They have lists. They've got, like, I have friends who had spreadsheets about their kids. I hate spreadsheets, but had spreadsheets about their kids' graduation and about, leaving for college and all the things they needed for college and all of that. And so for them, that made them feel a little more comfortable. I tried to be more present in the moment with you guys. And I think there was, or a loss or a mourning that was experienced by both myself, your dad probably too to a certain extent, and also and you. Like yours, I think got pushed up right when we went into lockdown, like because you didn't get that normal traditional closure. But we knew fairly quickly going into lockdown that's what it was going to look like, and that your senior year as you knew it was over. So I think you
Mhm.
were almost forced. It's kind of like an unexpected death, right? Like you didn't expect to lose that amount. So I think you were going through some mourning. I was going through some mourning. I know we went around and around with, okay, I need pictures of you in your cap and gown. And I really felt, because I didn't get that bookend graduation ceremony for you like I had with your brother and sister, right? Like, and so I think there is a grief, there is a mourning of this chapter is over, right? And I think there's also conflict there because the parent is potentially trying to hang on a little tighter because they know time is fleeting, right? And
Mhm.
it's, oh, there's a thumbs up, sorry. Time is fleeting. And um, parents are holding on a little tighter while kids are pushing a little more away from their parent, and their heads are already in the next piece of the game. Like you said, you kind of knew what year classes were going to be. If kids are trying to figure out where they're going to live, what they're going to do, all of those things, like they're on to their next thing. And in the moment, and they're sad at the actual graduation ceremony, and then there's the party, and then it's over. Like
Mhm.
it's that quickly, it's over. And so then they're on to the next thing, and the parents like, wait. So I think, while it's exciting, it's great to see family. It can be kind of overwhelming if you're doing the big graduation party, if you're doing a family trip, if you've got the senior banquet, there's a lot of things to go to, right? And a lot of things to do. And you got to take pictures for prom, and while it's great to have all of those memories, that process comes with some weight to it. And so then you get to graduation, and for the parent too, it's like, okay, that's over. And take a quick breath, and then you're on to the next thing. You're like, okay, well, senior year is not over.
Mhm.
Happens because there's this summer piece, right? A year is a year. And some people may argue that senior year starts when your kid is done being a junior. I don't see it that way because I think most kids make some sort of a transition, whether that's to a full-time job or that's to the military or that's to, going to college in the fall. So I think over that next summer, there is a launch piece of
Mm,
senior year. I think it's important to mention there are some kids who chose to graduate early, and school may or may not have had a fall graduation ceremony. Most schools don't for
mm,
high school. And so some of those kids have chosen different paths. And so their ending might look different. Some kids may be really fearful about high school being over and not knowing what they want to do, like you mentioned, but also like afraid to go out on their own. And that can be kind of intimidating for some kids. And so I think it's important to remember that not all kids are like chomping at the bit for this to be over. So if you are a parent and you have a kid who is their whole senior year just sad or scared or anxious or like that is also a normal emotion. I don't think it's what the majority of kids go through because I think what you described, Kate, is a more typical reaction. And the funny thing is, at the top of the podcast, I said, there seems to be patterns that are the same from family to family, kid to kid. I think there's also patterns generationally. Like what you described was very much like my senior year. Those are traditions that have been around, I don't know, probably since your grandma went to high school. I don't, like it'd be a fun conversation to have with her after she listens to this podcast. But I think it's important to remember that not everybody experiences it the same way. And for parents who are having to see their child struggling senior year, that also can be really hard. You know, they maybe feel the loss for their child that their child is missing out on things which may or may not be important to that child. Like out of all three kids that we had, if there was one that had to miss out on prom and senior banquet and graduation ceremony and all that, I was glad it was you.
mm,
Other two would have lost it. Like
mm,
if they had gotten to that point, right, and then that was snatched away, they're both very much more about tradition and pomp and circumstance and celebration and than you are necessarily. And so I think we were able to still celebrate and do some fun things, but I think it's important to remember that not every child experiences this the same way. And I think the heartache for parents can be a little different depending on how your child is processing senior year,
mm.
right? So we get through graduation and we've got summer. We've led a little bit into what that might look like for you, helping your child find an apartment, helping your child, if they will let you, right? Helping your child get ready for college. Some kids don't want that input. They just want to do it. It is, after all, their journey. I was blessed and lucky enough that my kids all let me be part of that for them, helping them figure out the transition, helping them figure out what that was going to look like, helping them make sure they had everything they needed, right, in order to be able to do that. But that's not the experience of all kids. Not all kids parent involved and not all kids, even if their parent was involved, are well prepared when
Mhm.
they get out into the real world and have to actually adult. So what do you remember about that summer of transition, Cade? For you, again, yours was unique, but I know we went on a mom and son date night last night to dinner, and we were talking about how much fun you had that summer with your little bubble, right, of people, even though it was COVID. You kind of had an isolation bubble between work and your friend group. So talk a little bit about summer and what you think kids experience and what you experienced.
Sure. I think kind of like I mentioned earlier with senior year kind of being that last time to just, be carefree and be a kid and have fun. That's how I kind of viewed that summer was it's that transition period of okay, high school is coming to an end. And for me it was college is starting. Again, college can be substituted for whatever your plan is after high school. But it was just like I just remember a very carefree, fun time of just hanging out with friends, enjoying life, working. I worked with a lot of my friends at the time. So even work, was kind of, I viewed it
Mm.
as, time to hang out with my friends and, just having fun with that while also preparing, for what that next step is. If that is, preparing to move out to go to college, I did college from online. So I stayed at home. So but that's even something you still have to prepare for, to prepare to,
Mhm.
just take on that new, and whether it's you need to buy a new laptop or you need to buy books or you need to go to the campus to get your student ID, things like that. And I think a lot of kids too, especially those who go away for whatever their next step is, view that as kind of a closing period to, make sure they see all the friends that they want to see, or, go to their favorite restaurant in town or things like that. Because depending on, your situation, where you end up, how far away you are, you might not be home from August to December until you come home for Christmas
Mhm.
break, or maybe it's Thanksgiving break, or, whatever the first time you come home is, it's going to be a while away. So, you might not see those same friends again for a while, or you might not be able to go to, your favorite park or whatever it is. So I know a lot of my friends kind of use that as like a closing out period. And, again, making sure they saw everyone they wanted to see and did the things they wanted to do, at least in the first part of that summer. Then I think towards the end of summer, you kind of get more of that preparation and that excitement for whatever it is. You're buying the things to decorate your dorm room, or you're going back to school shopping, or you're moving out on your own into your first apartment, or whatever your situation brings. It's just that transition period, and you're kind of closing out one chapter of your life and starting a new chapter. And I'm sure as a parent mom, that's hard too, especially if it, is your first kid or your last kid. I think that those
Mhm.
are sometimes the hardest, because your first kid, you've never experienced it before. It's the
Right.
first baby leaving the house. And then with the last kid, it's like it's the last kid leaving the house. And then you're done after that. So as a parent, what is that like for you, that summer, in between?
Yeah, summer was an interesting time because I think, my focus was on making sure we had our T's crossed and our I's dotted. And I knew you wanted to go out and have fun and, have that closeout period, and you wouldn't see those friends again for potentially a long time. But I think as the parent, it's also very normal to feel like, but where's our family time? Like,
Hmm.
and just developmentally, right? Like kids' friends are the center of their universe at that point in time. For most kids, that's their driver. And so the parents are like, "You're going out again? Like you're not going to be home for dinner?" And it's peeling off of the band-aid, right? Because you're going to have weeks where your child is not at the dinner table if they move out, right? If they move far away, if they are away at college. And so it's is preparing you, I think, as a parent that summer. And, all of this is set up by design, whether you believe in God, the universe, whatever. Like this whole senior year is set up by design so that parents are ready, as hard as it is, when it's actually time for their child to leave. But kids are also ready. There's been that pushback, right? But it's hard that summer because you're, again, sensitive to the fact that time is short. You're watching the days tick off. You're not getting to spend as much time with your kid as you wish you could. So those things are all happening, but yet you're excited for the next new chapter. So it's that weird, where you can hold two emotions at the same time. You can be excited and sad at
Hmm.
at the same time. And I think a lot of people think you have to be one or the other, and that's confusing, right? When it's like how can I be happy my kid's going to go have this experience but sad for myself, that I'm not going to have them around all the time. And how do I harness that and not take it out on my kid, not make them feel guilty for leaving, not so I think there's that weird dynamic there. I would tell kids to be sensitive to the fact that your parents are dealing with that. Also not your problem to solve, right? But for parents to also give themselves grace and realize, have your time, like be able to just fully feel those feelings and move through it so that you can be there in the capacity that your child wants them to be there at the end of that senior summer. So, parents get to choose how they engage with their child during that life-changing transition year. I think it's really important to have adult level conversations. A lot of these kiddos are turning 18 during their senior year, so they are technically adults, but yet they're still living under your roof. They're still dependent on you for most everything. And so it can be a really interesting year, debating curfews because they're an adult, but yet they live at home. All of those things happen as part of raising a child. But that senior year can be really where stuff hits the fan, for lack of a better word, and you really figure out how to start navigating that relationship with big.
Hmm.
So, young adults get to make a ton of memories. They get to make big decisions. They get to leap into their future. So while there's a big contrast of emotions, and that can be confusing and conflict might be inevitable, right? Those are growth moments. Be reassured that it is normal and that you too will come out on the other side of this, as so many people have, right? The quality of your relationship can be tested during senior year and it may change. That's okay. It's to be expected. Kids are flying, and parents are actually faced with potentially pushing their child out of the nest. As crazy as that seems, that feels so weird to a parent to be like, okay, it's time for you to fly. I think, no, wait, I don't want to let go. So it's natural. It's a big part of your relational journey with your child, but very emotional and also sometimes challenging. Cade, anything, parting thoughts about your experience for senior year?
For
Things
sure.
you'd
I
like?
think, yeah, just accepting, all the emotions that come with senior year. There's going to be times where you're excited. There's going to be times where you're anxious. There's going to be times where you're having fun. There's going to be times where you're sad. And I think that all of those are normal and they're all going to come and come at both the parent and the child. So I think that that's important to just kind of accept that, realize that. And if you go into senior year knowing that, I think that that kind of sets you up for success a little bit better versus if you think you're only going to be excited for senior year and all the fun stuff you get to do. Then when that sadness does hit, it's kind of like, whoa, I didn't expect this.
Mhm.
Or if you are, expecting that sadness, you might miss out on some of those moments of joy and that excitement because you're just so focused on, oh, this is the last time I'm seeing these people, or this is my last prom or my last whatever it may be. So I think it's important just to accept all the emotions that come with that change. And, it's a very exciting time for both, the parent and the child, but can also be a little nerve wracking. So just accepting those feelings, accepting them as they are, and just trying to live in the moment and enjoy it as much as you can.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's a common experience. Talk to your friends and maybe talk to friends that are a little bit ahead of you on the path. If you're feeling this slew of emotions and you're relying solely on other people who are also in the midst of this slew of emotions, it can just amplify what's already an intense set of feelings. So seek out some people maybe who've been down the path, and you will feel better when you realize that, you know what, it all turns out okay.
Sure, for sure. Well, I think with that being said, that is a wrap for this episode of Raising Bigs. We thank you all for listening today. We hope you found some takeaways, a fresh perspective, and maybe even an action step or two in this episode as you go to tackle senior year. Above it all, we hope it opens an opportunity for conversation between bigs and their parents, just to have open lines of communication and to talk about all the feelings that we're feeling. We are definitely not experts by any means, but we can authentically share what we're learning in hopes of making the path a little bit easier for all of those who are listening. You can find this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube. Please subscribe and share with those in your circle who you think might benefit from hearing it. A new episode will be posted on those platforms every single week.
So if you would like to get in touch with us, you can visit my life coaching website at marcyhawkinson.com or shoot me an email at lifecoachmarcy@gmail.com. I'm also on Facebook at Life Coach Marcy and Instagram at life_coach_Marcy. Cade, where can our listeners find you?
My handle across all social media platforms is the Cade Berrigan. That covers all social media right there. And the best way to contact us, whether you want to give us feedback, ask us questions, or anything else, is to DM either one of us on social media or to, again, reach out on the contact me page on my mom's website, which is marcyhawkinson.com. We appreciate any feedback, topic ideas, or questions you may have, or even just comments if you enjoyed listening to the show. And with that being said, we will see you next time on Raising Bigs.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.